He kōna ipurangi tēnei nā te reo irirangi o Aotearoa.
This podcast includes discussion of self-harm, suicide and sexual assault. Please listen with care. If you or someone you know needs support, you can contact the Need to Talk helpline anytime, day or night, by texting or calling 1737. A wider list of mental health support services can be found on our show page, www.rnz.co.nz/NelliesBaby.
Maybe I'll have a coffee actually. I don't know why I felt like a tea. It felt like a tea kind of situation, didn't it? But I don't know.
We've come to see Nellie's sister Mavis and her daughter Tracy. They're in Waikanae, north of Wellington, at Tracy's house. Mavis is about 80. She's small and kind of wiry, and her clothes are immaculate. She's sharp. She doesn't miss a thing.
When she gave birth, in case they did anything wrong.
Tracy's in her early 50s, but looks younger. And clearly, she's very close to her mum.
You fainted.
I fainted, yeah.
I've never seen someone faint like that before.
Everyone, me, Sarah, Sarah's partner Tom, Mavis and Tracy, have all squeezed into this tiny living room where we're perching on a couple of couches and all talking over the top of each other.
You couldn't see anything, but
I just felt emotional for her, you know.
Mavis and Sarah haven't seen each other since Sarah's first visit to the family 6 years ago. So there's a lot to catch up on. Not least the news that we've managed to find Sarah's father Gordon, and that we'd been to visit him a few days earlier.
We found my dad through DNA.
Pardon?
We found my dad through DNA. I did one of these
great.
ancestry tests.
yeah, we've got some.
We're going to do that. We're going to do it, you know. To see
While Sarah brings Mavis up to speed, Tracy makes everyone a cuppa. I'm grateful for this small, comforting ritual because while it's lovely for Sarah to see her aunt again, some big questions about Nellie's life and death remain, and we're hoping that Mavis might have some answers for us. I'm Kirsty Johnston and this is Nellie's Baby. Episode 6, Anne-Marie.
Well, you should
three
pop up with
daughters.
me.
the 3 daughters.
While Sarah is catching Mavis up on our investigation into Nellie's life, I'm going to rewind a bit and fill you in. Like I said last episode, even though we've been focused on finding Gordon during the last month, we've also been hunting for 2 very important documents which might answer a lot of lingering questions about Nellie. The first is Nellie's full coronial file, which should reveal the details of how she died. It's apparently arriving next week. The second is Nellie's medical notes from her time at Porirua Hospital. We think these notes will hold key information about how and when Nellie was committed to Porirua, and maybe most significantly, why she was committed. You'll remember we found one mention that Nellie had schizophrenia, but we've not managed to find anything else about that so far. To get these notes, we sent a Privacy Act request to the Wellington District Health Board. The Privacy Act basically allows you to ask for information about yourself. Sarah sent the email in late September, and by the end of November, she had a reply.
I got back this email, which was quite dismissive. It said, "Thank you for your request asking for Nellie's medical records believed to be held in notes at Wellington Hospital. I'm sorry to advise you we were unable to locate any medical notes under her name. Thorough searches, including archived records in storage, were made and have been unsuccessful. Many of the CCDHB patient records from 1987 and earlier have been destroyed."
Yep, you heard right. The health board said it had destroyed not just Nellie's notes, but a whole bunch of files from before 1987.
Therefore, Section 53 2A of the Privacy Act 2020 applies, where we must deny your request on the basis the information is not readily retrievable, does not exist, cannot be found. And they didn't even put yours sincerely, there's just a name of the person.
I was annoyed at this, but not really surprised. From my experience, New Zealand government record keeping is extremely poor. I was planning to simply respond by saying, "Look again," but Sarah had another idea. She realised that, obviously, there would be notes from after 1987.
And I just said, "I believe my mother died in your hospital in 2008 and was treated there. This seems very strange that no notes on her care there over the years exists. Is this now a matter for the Privacy Commissioner? Where have her notes and records and files gone?"
To our surprise, Sarah got a response almost straight away. Not from the information team, but this time from a lawyer.
Within 6 hours, she said, "Good afternoon, Sarah. I am so sorry that our medical records gave you incorrect information. I do have the medical records relating to your birth mother, and I am in the process of collating these. Within 6 hours of, we cannot absolutely, we've done a thorough search, nothing can be found, sorry, all traces of it gone. Within 6 hours, oh yeah, no, I've got them here."
The email went on to say there were 2 separate lots of medical records. One was about Sarah's birth from 1984. The other was about Nellie's admission to a geriatric home after Porirua had closed, so maybe from the 1990s. On top of that, it said there was also 6 volumes of mental health records, which we assumed were from Nellie's time at Porirua. For some reason, they were going to send the medical records first, but they asked for a time extension on the mental health records. Sarah was instantly really suspicious about this.
I think what they're planning on doing is giving me the records for my birth and hoping that I'm quiet. Because I think, the thought of her copying 6 volumes is probably making her go, "Oh my goodness, I don't want to have to scan all these to this person who has a right for this information, but obviously doesn't want to send them via email."
To cut a long story short, right now, as of sitting here with Mavis, we still don't have the mental health records. Basically, Sarah was right to be suspicious because the hospital decided on her behalf, without talking to her, that she was no longer interested in them. And now, the legal team coordinator is on holiday until the end of January, and so we have to wait. But all of that aside, just before Christmas 2022, amid the whole excitement of finding Gordon, we also found the full records from the time of Sarah's birth in 1984. And they are fascinating.
Wellington Women's Hospital, 30th March 1984. Dear Dr. Gawadan, this patient was seen at the antenatal clinic of Kenaparu Hospital on 28th March. She is a patient who is in Villa 7 at Porirua Hospital as an informal patient with mental retardation. It is impossible to get a history about her last menstrual period, and she thinks she really only got pregnant a few days ago. She is, however, sure about the father. She wants the baby to live, and therefore it would be impossible to perform a termination of pregnancy.
This letter from a doctor at Kenaparu was one of the first parts of the notes. They begin when Nellie is about 3 months pregnant, and they reveal that, as we thought, Nellie was taken off contraception because the staff assumed she was going through menopause.
She is now about 24 weeks and, in view of her age of 43, is at risk of toxemia, as well as gestational diabetes and intrauterine growth retardation. Furthermore, I think we would have to consider her at risk of ischemic heart disease and also respiratory problems, particularly in labour, as she looks much older than her 43 years. Yours sincerely, J. Mutton.
When we got to the rest of the notes, we found that, unfortunately, some parts of the files had been blacked out. Initially, it seemed like they just removed names, like the name of the man that Nellie said was the baby's father. But when we looked closer, there were also other parts that had been blacked out, with no explanation, including possible descriptions of Nellie's mental health diagnosis. I was half expecting this. You might remember that we spoke to another former Porirua patient, Beverly Wardle Jackson, who said the only files she was able to get from her time at Porirua were also heavily redacted. Funnily enough, Mavis is totally unsurprised when we tell her about our battles with the health authorities over these documents and the blacked out parts.
So I'd be interested to see, because obviously we want these medical notes, which they've been
Will they give you them all?
Oh, that's what I want. Yeah, I want all of them. So, but we'll see.
And there could be a cover up in it and everything.
Well,
written, couldn't it?
technically, now they've told me they exist, they can't exactly turn around and say, "Oh, it's not funny."
Yeah, but they could lose file.
They
We've
could
lost.
lose them. Yeah, well, we saw that at the hospital.
I find Mavis's cynicism really interesting. It makes me think that she must have a lot more to say about the health system and how Nellie was treated. But I'm going to come back to that later, because right now I want to continue focusing on Nellie's pregnancy. I feel like between the records we have found and Mavis and Tracy's memories, for the first time we should be able to build a clear picture of Sarah's birth and her adoption.
So Mavis, I want to hear the story about how you found out Nellie was having a baby.
Oh, this particular day, I rang up to take Nellie out and they said, "Oh, no, I'm sorry. You can't take her out today." And I said, "Why is that?" "Oh."
And you were then...
And then I came home and I said, "Oh, Morris," I said, "something's wrong with Nellie.
Yeah.
They won't let me take her out." I said,
Yeah.
"Something's wrong with Nellie, she must be dying or something, And they rang up later. I can't remember how long. They wanted all the family. That even made me think even then, "Oh, she's dying, That's what I'm thinking. And we all go up there. Nellie's sitting there. "I'm pregnant," as soon as we go into the room. "I'm pregnant," she says, And the doctor came and they talked to us. We're going to, Nellie has chosen to keep this baby. That's what the doctor said.
The documents show that when Nellie was about 6 months pregnant, she was admitted to Wellington Women's Hospital. An initial assessment labelled her mentally retarded, but there's no mention of schizophrenia. They also label her as promiscuous, which I wasn't personally aware was a medical condition, even in the 1980s. The admission report records that she brought with her one suitcase locked in the store cupboard. It contains nappies, a jacket, a nightie, and a cuddly rug. This admission document is actually signed by Nellie, which really catches me by surprise. I didn't know that she could write. Her signature is this beautiful, cursive, if sort of shaky, N. Wilson. You can actually have a look at it on our website. Nellie was kept in hospital for much of her pregnancy for observation because the doctors considered the pregnancy high risk.
Just relaxing off now.
Nurses made multiple entries in the logbook about Nellie every day, so we can actually track her pregnancy minute by minute. Most of it's just routine stuff. Her blood pressure, the baby's size, that kind of thing. But there's also notes about the birth education they arranged for Nellie.
And slowly the mouth of the uterus begins to open. All these changes...
They showed her a video about labour and gave her a tour of the delivery suite, and it seems like they explained the treatment she was getting really patiently and carefully.
Did she understand she was having a baby?
Yeah, I think she did.
Oh, yeah.
Because she sort of would hold her tummy like she's just naturally protecting it.
Yeah.
Did you see that? Just protecting it,
But one thing that the nurses really struggled with was Nellie's cigarette addiction. They were trying to teach her that smoking would have an impact on the baby, but it just didn't seem to resonate. Almost every second entry in the notes is about this battle that they were having with her. Like, for example, there's a log on June 27. It says that she was allowed 5 before lunch, 5 after lunch, and 3 after tea. It recorded that, despite this allowance, Nellie would pester the staff constantly for her next smoke.
You can get your arm out of the sleeve. Thank you.
If she didn't get a cigarette, she'd get kind of agitated, the notes would say, and she'd start making what they called like noisy accusations at the staff. So probably just asking them for another smoke because she was really, really addicted.
Relax your arm. That's it.
There are also a lot of comments about how Nellie was homesick for Porirua and for her boyfriend, the guy we think's called Johnny. Occasionally, they'd let her go back to Porirua for the weekend, but then they would make sure she came back to the hospital. Mavis said that during this time, she and Tracy visited Nellie a lot, even attending her appointments with her.
When Nellie gave birth, we wanted to be there when she gave birth in case they did anything wrong. I don't know, we just had that fear that they wanted to make sure that everything was right.
Finally, in August 1984, Sarah was born. She was 3.6 kilos and perfectly healthy.
And you were born at 10:30, because I wrote it down.
On a Friday.
I got it in my little book on a Friday. Yes, 84, wasn't it?
She named you Anne-Marie.
Anne-Marie.
That's my middle name. My parents kept that as my middle name because they really wanted, if I ever met her in the future, they wanted to have that in there.
That is really
I didn't know that. It's really awesome.
It really is. Hey, isn't it? And then,
The nurses recorded that Nellie was delighted with her baby. She was very anxious that her boyfriend meet her and extremely proud to show her to Mavis and Tracy.
you were strong little baby, wasn't she? Eh? She was strong, and when the doctors were looking, examining you,
yeah, the hips and
that, and you were going, like this, and Nellie saying, "Be careful on what you're doing to my baby." You know, it was just so lovely to see that care.
Nellie was allowed to visit and cuddle the baby. She really liked to watch her being fed, and they let her take her for a walk around the ward in the pram.
According to the notes, Nellie was allowed to see me, so they used to bring me in and Nellie could hold me for a bit. But of course, after an hour or so, she sort of got a bit bored, distracted.
There's photos of you, her holding you.
Yeah,
there's photos
and
of
this
us
one
all
wanted me so
you.
much to have you. She was there all the time.
How old were you then?
I think I was at intermediate, about 12, 13.
Yes.
Oh, yes.
Yes, and
Mavis says that initially, the family of Nellie's boyfriend, this is the Samoan guy called Johnny, were lined up for the adoption. But that fell through because Sarah very clearly was not Samoan and not his baby.
But they just must have come and had a look at you, and seen you, and
thought, well, no, obviously not.
Yeah.
I mean, you can tell now, can't you? Plus, they had bright red hair.
Remember, at this point, no one knew that Gordon was Sarah's father, although they knew that Nellie might have had multiple partners. Mavis said she and Tracy wanted to adopt Sarah themselves, but Mavis's husband didn't agree. He was adopted, and he felt strongly that another family, one without children of their own, should have the chance to raise a child.
I did really want you, this little girl here.
Oh, yeah, madly wanted
you. We had you. We wanted to be with Nellie.
We used to see you nearly every day.
When Nellie gave birth.
A few days after her birth, Sarah got moved to Kenepuru Hospital and Nellie went back to Porirua. Mavis and Tracy were really worried about the baby being alone, so they'd go visit her at Kenepuru. It was an odd atmosphere.
And that's when we went to see you at Kenepuru, and I remember saying to the nurse, "Come to see Nellie Wilson's baby." "Shh," she said, "don't say that." She said, "There's big ears around here," she said, "because you were up for adoption and people would put two and two together. If adopted person who was going to adopt you had come to pick you up. So they didn't want,
they wanted to keep
they didn't want people to know." And then
Mavis was confused. She couldn't work out if it was the adoption that was the big secret or if it was because of the fact that Nellie was from a mental hospital. But she said while the nurses were a bit weird about her visiting, they genuinely did seem to care for Sarah.
So how beautiful was that?
Yeah. Because we were worried about the baby being alone most of the time. You know, but you had another baby there in the room.
We seen Sarah and this other little baby in this big room by themselves, where all the mothers and all that who had their babies had them in their room with them. And we would say, oh, we feel sorry. We particularly said, we feel sorry for you. You're in this big room all by yourself. And they said, the nurse said, don't worry, when everyone's gone, we have them in the office with us. Now, isn't that beautiful?
What about Nellie? So after Sarah was adopted, did she talk about her? Or
She did, didn't she? She'd say, she's different to my other baby. That's what she'd say, didn't she? I said, what? Different to my other baby.
Remember, for a long time, Mavis had believed that Nellie had had another baby when she was just 14.
I don't know if she had imagination or what was going on with her.
did you suspect she'd had another child? Or
I did.
Where did that come from?
It came from Nellie, really.
Nellie,
didn't
yeah.
it?
She did the way she said. And I thought, and I put it down to only 14 that she was away, you know, and I thought, but she would have only been 14. Maybe it didn't happen, you know, but...
The doctor said something about, oh, she's done that before, I think you said, or she's...
We thought she might have
Nellie always
said that she had another baby, but she would have been 14. And we don't know if it's...
I don't know. I wasn't there
we
then.
we don't really know, you know? We don't really know. And once I asked
your doctor,
which
was a family doctor even when Nellie was growing up.
And I said to him one day, I said, my sister Nellie's in Pyra Hospital and she's had a baby that was you. And I said, I believe she might have had a baby before. He said, best leave things alone.
I can tell from the way that Tracy keeps chiming in that these are things they've gone over and over trying to work out what it all means. From a journalistic perspective, it's really useful for me to hear all of this firsthand at last, to weigh up what's fact and what's speculation. And I can see that for Sarah, it's so nice to be able to feel just how much Mavis and Tracy really cared for Nellie, and for her too when she was just a tiny baby. I feel like it's yet more proof for Sarah that she wasn't unwanted like she feared. She really was loved. Even after Sarah was adopted, Mavis said they used to drive past the suburb where they thought she lived with her new family and they'd daydream about her new life.
And we'd drive past, I wonder what she's doing up there. I bet she's up there somewhere. I think, I hope she's happy and hope she's having a lovely life, didn't we? That's what we used to think.
But, of course, we aren't here just to fact check the details of Sarah's birth. There's something in the birth and adoption notes which reminds me that one of the main reasons we came to visit Mavis is to find out why Nellie was admitted to Porirua in the first place. Nellie's nurses repeatedly mention her incontinence. They write all the time about how she has to be reminded to go to the toilet or she'll wet herself. Sarah's done some research into incontinence in women. She's wondering if it could be linked to either sexual violence or a previous pregnancy, as it's much more common to suffer incontinence if you've had a baby. Until now, we've been jumping all over the show, so once everyone's had their cup of tea and they're settled, I take Mavis back to her childhood, back to before Nellie developed mental health issues, to try and get everything in a chronological order.
My maiden name was Mavis Jean Wilson, and I grew up until I was 7 years old. I grew up in Newtown.
And what was your relationship like with Nellie when you were children?
The big sister that I looked up to.
How much older than you was she?
Well, I'm about 5 years difference, I'd say, yeah.
So what kind of things did you used to do as children?
We played. Nellie was so exciting to play games with. At Newtown in Horner Street, there was a brick hill, gorse and things growing on it. We'd go up there and have adventures up there. We'd see. I remember once saying to my sister Nellie, look, it looks like gold there, you know. So we're going to be rich, and trying to find it, and it was broken glass. So, you know, things like that, you know.
And so Nellie, she went to school?
She went to school, yes, she went to Newtown School. And then when she was a certain age, she went to Wellington South Intermediate.
And what did your mum tell you about the classes that Nellie was in?
I don't know when she went to a special class, but she was in a special class.
What does that mean, special class?
I don't know. Everyone thinks you're dumb if you go to a special class, don't they? You know.
What was Nellie like?
Oh, she was just fun. Didn't seem mean. I looked up to her. She was the big sister, you know. She was the one that took me to the zoo.
What was her personality like?
Kind. She'd give you anything. She would give you anything.
Mavis tells us stories about Nellie when she was young, about how Nellie once brought the cat inside and hid it in the chimney until her father said he was going to light a fire, and she had to confess she'd brought the cat indoors. And there's one about how she dressed up as a ghost at health camp and got put in segregation, and about how she always carried her handbag slung over the crook of her arm, just like a model. Mavis says, from her perspective, there was nothing unusual about Nellie's childhood, but when Nellie was about 14, things changed.
So when did Nellie finish school? What happened?
Well, I don't know if she finished school at 14. I don't know if she, after Dad dying, you know, and Nellie away, I don't know.
She went away. How long for? Was that was before 14?
14, about 14, because Dad, that's how I put it down to 14, because Dad died and they didn't know where Nellie was. And my Mum rang up and said, I just got to tell you that Nellie's dad has died. She didn't come back to the funeral or anything. I don't know how long she was away for. I don't know if she went somewhere else after that. I know there was another place we went to see her at, over the hut somewhere.
Mavis is talking about the Hutt Valley, which is just north of Wellington.
You know, we're young. Mum took us all on a train to visit Nellie.
What was the place like that you visited her at?
I know there was a little baby, and we were worried about a heater with this baby. And there was another lady there, you know, but I don't remember, you know.
Just only fragments, eh?
Yeah, I just know. Yeah, young, not.
As you can hear, Mavis has only partial memories of this time. It's understandable. She would have only been about 9 or 10 years old. But she remembers that, for some unknown reason, Nellie went away. And she stayed somewhere, maybe 2 different places, after she finished intermediate school. So she would have been about 13, 14. While she was away, Nellie's father died. But Nellie didn't even come back for the funeral. And then when she did come home, Nellie didn't go back to school. That's not unusual in itself because lots of girls finished school at 14 back then. She got a job as a seamstress, making school uniforms. To get to work, Mavis said Nellie had to catch 2 trains to Petone, which is another suburb in Wellington. And Nellie had this job for 3 or 4 years before Mavis started hearing rumours about her.
Someone said to me on the way to school one day, they said to me, your sister works with my sister and she's at work and she's wetting herself. So she must have been starting to have a breakdown. You know, Nellie would come home with her blouse undone. You know, she's coming on, you know, and something's not right.
Mavis says her mum was suspicious that something had been happening to Nellie, either at work or on her way there. So one day, she followed her.
And my poor mum, she went to Wellington Station and she watched to see what Nellie was doing. She seen her go with this man and saw her go behind the statue. So my mum went up, "Get out," she says, you know. "Get out," and came home. And I don't know how long after that apparently she was crying nearly at home, just crying. So Mum called the doctor, and I think it was Dr. Smith at that time, and said that Nellie's got to go to Pyro Hospital. And that's when she was admitted to Pyro Hospital.
We tried asking more questions about this. Who was this man? What was going on? What was the connection to Nellie's mental health issues? But Mavis just didn't know.
So did you ever find out then or later what diagnosis they'd given her, or from your mum or anyone?
Just called it a mental breakdown, I think back then. Eh?
Mavis is a little unclear on the dates. She says she thinks Nellie might have been more like 19 or 20 on this first admission to Porirua, because Mavis remembers she was at high school herself around that time, and Nellie's 5 years older than her. So that means it would have been around 1960. Mavis tells me some stories about Nellie's time in Porirua. By now, they feel familiar. She describes those visits to the day room when Nellie was in F ward, the realisation that Nellie was having ECT after seeing her sleeping on a mattress on the floor, the shame of other people knowing that her sister was in a mental hospital. But Mavis also mentions something that Sarah and I hadn't realised before, which might explain why some of the documents we've seen have this much later admission date on them, which is that at one point, Nellie was actually discharged from Porirua to live with her mum.
And yet, when she lived with my mum, it was just so lovely when you went there. She was calm, and she slept with Mum.
I remember you saying about Auntie Nellie, like, maybe it was a cup of tea time.
Yes.
Were you and your mum?
Yeah, and she boiled the jug.
And she boiled the jug, but she'll half boil it because she's quite impatient.
Impatient, yeah. Because of half boil. Did you boil that jug,
Nellie?
Yes. Yeah, that's right, yeah. And she didn't boil it for her. She was too impatient.
Someone will wait for the jug to completely boil.
Mavis says having Nellie out of Porirua and at her mum's place was a really lovely time.
Boil that jug, mate. Yes, she'd say. No. She was impatient.
Then, in 1973, their mum died suddenly of lung problems, and Nellie didn't really have anywhere to go. She lived with another sister for a little while, and then a brother, but eventually she ended up back in care at Porirua later that year.
And how did you feel about Porirua? Did you think she was getting good care there, or were you concerned for her?
I didn't like it. I had to obey by the rules if I went up there, didn't I? You know, I couldn't complain because Mum
wanted to look after Auntie Nellie.
I wanted to have her, but my late husband didn't want it. You know,
it's a lot of work.
It would be, and as even Wendy said, Mum, the other sister said, would have been hard, Mum. We're growing up and that, but people do it.
What was it like up there? Did she tell you how she felt about living there?
She never really said, did she?
When she could, Mavis still used to have Nellie home for weekends. She said every time she'd go to pick her up, Nellie would be waiting for her with a group of her friends. Mavis would have to tell them that they couldn't come as well. Nellie would beg her, she said, but it was against the rules.
I'd give her a bath. Wash her clothes. And I'd give her my clothes. I'd just wash her clothes. I didn't care if they come back and that, you know. Just maybe she probably couldn't shower or bath herself properly. Just, and if she's wetting herself, well, it's going to be like that, isn't it?
In the early 1990s, it was announced that Porirua was closing. This was part of a process called deinstitutionalisation. This saw all the patients from psychiatric facilities around the country put back into the community, partly due to changing ideas about institutional care and partly due to government cuts to social welfare. The transition was extremely messy. It left so many patients caught in the cracks, either with nowhere to go or with options that were just totally unsuitable for their needs. Mavis says during this time, she was told it was up to her to find Nellie a new place to live. Initially, a social worker actually suggested a halfway house, she says, but luckily a nurse intervened and said that no, Nellie needed 24-hour care and a semi-supervised setting would not be enough. At first, Nellie ended up in a facility called Glenbrook because it was close to Mavis, but something happened, just what is unclear, and then she was transferred to Elizabeth Memorial Hospital, a specialist dementia hospital much further away.
Can you describe it for us?
It stunk, wheeze, because I suppose they do wet themselves. And
you walk in sort of thing and there's these big grown-up high chairs. And they're all sitting in these big high chairs. That's what I remember of Elizabeth Memorial.
We've got the intake notes from Elizabeth Memorial Hospital, but not from Glenbrook, which I don't understand. These notes from Elizabeth are the ones that black out Nellie's diagnosis with no given reason. They also blacked out where she was admitted to. Again, doesn't make sense, because they've also left in other details that are potentially more sensitive, like the fact, apparently, that she could get abusive. There's other weird things about the Elizabeth intake forms too, like it lists Nellie's occupation as a retired typist, and under likes, it just says most things, and then it lists her hobbies and her interests as running. Elizabeth Memorial was where Nellie lived out her last years. Mavis tells us that while she was there, she was hospitalised multiple times, including for a skin graft on her leg, apparently caused by another patient ramming her with a walker.
Yes, and I said to the doctor,
on her leg?
On her leg, I said, oh, how did she get that? Well, how come she got a skin graft? Apparently someone with a walker, I suppose, they had crashed it down on her foot. And you know what the doctor said? She gets as good as she's given.
Nellie's final hospitalisation came in September 2008. According to the brief summary we've seen from the public coroner's verdict, Nellie developed pneumonia and was being treated for it by her doctor. She was improving, and then apparently she had a fall in her bedroom and fractured her nose. She wasn't hospitalised for the head injury at that time, but 3 days later her condition went downhill rapidly, and by the time she got to the hospital in an ambulance, she was in a coma. The first Mavis knew of all of this was when she got a call from the hospital asking if the family wanted to keep Nellie on life support.
They said, we've got Nellie here, and they said, we're not sure if she's got something, brain clottage or something. Aneurysm or what. And they said, what do you want us to do? I said, I don't know. I said, I'm not God.
You just don't want Nellie to suffer.
I don't want Nellie to suffer. Do what you have to do.
Nellie Wilson died on 28 September 2008. She was 68 years old. A post-mortem by a pathologist diagnosed Nellie's cause of death as heart failure. But because Nellie, by that stage, was a compulsory mental health patient, after the post-mortem, the coroner actually held a full inquest into the case, which is finally a breakthrough for us. It means there's a file with hundreds of documents from police, doctors, psychiatrists, and the forensic pathologist, which we have been granted permission to see. We are hoping that at last it will provide some answers about what really happened the week Nellie died.
If she'd had a fall out of bed 3 days earlier, why was she not taken to hospital for it to be treated?
That's next time on Nellie's Baby.
Nellie's Baby is presented by Kirsty Johnston. The executive producer is Tim Watkin and the executive editor is John Hartevelt. The producers are William Ray and Justin Gregory. The sound engineers are Phil Benge, William Saunders and Mark Chesterman. The production coordinator is Brianna Juritich. Special thanks to Dr. Hilary Stace and Dr. Olive Webb for their help in producing this podcast, and extra special thanks to Sarah.
Botox Cosmetic, out of botulinum toxin A, FDA approved for over 20 years. So, talk to your specialist to see if Botox Cosmetic is right for you.
For full prescribing information, including boxed warning, visit BotoxCosmetic.com or call 877-351-0300.
Remember to ask for Botox Cosmetic by name. To see for yourself and learn more, visit BotoxCosmetic.com. That's BotoxCosmetic.com.